I was only up here a couple of days ago and I picked every single raspberry that was ripe, and now the canes are absolutely loaded again. So it's time to get picking. And now in September, there are quite a few harvests coming in. The season is changing and there are quite a few things that I want to get done here in the allotment garden and in the home garden this month. So things to help bring in the harvest and to get the garden prepared for winter and also next spring. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through my list of garden jobs for September, let you know what I'm doing, and maybe they'll help you to find some things to do in your garden this month as well. Also, my garden is zone 8 roundabouts. I'm on the Isle of Man and that's in Britain, and sowing and planting times might be different in your region. I found the tiniest little frog in my compost pile. Let's have a look, see if I can get him here on camera. Look at how tiny he is. Oh, that is just so adorable. I didn't expect to see such a tiny little frog living over here, but it's a good sign. The compost is ready and there are larger invertebrates and vertebrates living in it. I've popped the little guy right back where I found him. Oh, he's so tiny. I think this is the smallest frog that I found here at the allotment. Just gonna leave him there and I will cover this back over when I'm done. I had some black plastic on the compost to protect it. But I wanted to bring you over here because building compost piles is something people tend to think about doing in spring, but now in September it's a really good idea to get new ones built and to get old ones repaired. And my preferred way of having compost areas is to use old pallets. I mean, I have the Dalek composters as well. I've got one left actually, but these are just so much easier. You can get a lot more bulk inside. And now at this time of the year, there's going to be a lot more dead foliage and waste material coming out of the garden, and you can just chuck it in one of these. And that's what I do. I just throw everything that I think will make good compost. No particular order, just as it arrives or it happens upon my weeding activities or clearing activities, that I just chuck it inside and leave it. And after a year, it turns into this stuff, which is really nutritious compost that I can use as mulch. Now this bay on the other side, I have started filling, and it will continue to fill up until the end of this year, and then I'll cover it and leave it until this time next year. And I've already been using some of this compost on my beds. And I've also created a new pallet compost pile at the new house. And this is one of the first steps in being able to create my own compost, to be able to feed my own garden without having to buy compost in. And I recently did get in touch with a local company who's making organic compost, and it is really expensive. And I might have to do it just to get myself started off a little bit, but I don't see myself wanting to pay £300 for a truckload of compost every year. That's just not something that I'm willing to do. And so using waste from the garden, making your own, is not only recycling and great for the environment, but it's going to save you some money as well. It wasn't that long ago that I cleared this particular bed of the garlic that was growing here, and you can see there's a bit of the elephant garlic on the far side there, and it's died down a bit. It will start regrowing again in the spring. And what I did at that point is I covered this entire bed with mulch. And this is another job for September, is that as crops start vacating beds, we need to fill them back up. We shouldn't leave any soil bare. Bare soil over the winter gets eroded, it gets washed away. The goodness and the nutrients that you've put into it basically is washed away. And we want to stop that from happening. And we can do that in a couple of ways. First, by mulching. So spreading a layer of compost or aged manure on tops of our beds. And I use both, and generally about an inch thick. And I tend to mulch in spring and in autumn, but autumn it's quite important just to be able to replenish the soil and put that layer on so that the soil underneath doesn't get picked up and washed away with the rain or with the wind. And the composting style that I use in the Pallet composters that I just showed you is cold composting. So it doesn't get to those hot temperatures that kill weed seeds. So you'll see that there are loads of weed seeds growing in this bed. And I can see chamomile, I can see, what else can I see in here? It's hard to make out some, but they're all pretty much annual plants. And so I'm going to leave them in situ until spring at least. And these work as a green manure. And you might have heard that term before. And a green manure is just a type of plant that you would sow, and usually you deliberately sow it on beds, to grow over winter, hold the soil in the compost down, and then in spring you can dig it in or remove it in some way and turn it back into goodness for the soil. And so it creates nutrients, but it also stops erosion. And I have naturally been able to do this with the chamomile seeds and the other annual seeds that get into my cold compost. Another thing that we can be doing right now to protect the soil and essentially get the most out of our vegetable gardens is to fill it with more plants, more edible plants. These are purple sprouting broccoli, and this is a type of brassica that will overwinter here, and then early next year we'll get an amazing harvest. This is Uncle Bert's purple kale. This is one of my favorite kales at the moment. And together they are protected with a net. So not only filling our beds with mulch and compost, but also plants that are hardy enough to survive winter and that we can harvest through autumn and winter is always going to be a good idea. Another September gardening task, though, is protecting our crops. As the season gets colder, there are going to be wild animals, hungry birds, hungry rodents, other types of wildlife in your region that are going to be attracted to whatever's left in your veg patch. And one thing that I am going to be on top of this year is protecting what New Zealand yams I have left, the oca, because every year they get wiped out up here at the allotment, I think by rodents. So using netting, using other barriers to protect your plants so that you can get a harvest is going to be important. And if you do want to encourage wildlife and to support them, leave a few plants, but make sure that you protect some of those crops for yourself, because you've put in all the hard work. You should be able to reap the benefit as well. Now this big behemoth of a plant is lovage. It's a type of culinary herb, and if you look closely, it is covered in seeds, and I can pull some of these off right now. And this is another task for September, is saving seeds. Oh yes, loads and loads and loads and loads. I mean, that amount that I have in my hand right now is probably what you'd pay a good 2 or 3 pounds for if you were buying these from a seed supplier. Now with these seeds, I can save them, dry them out, and sow them again next year, or bring them to the annual seed swap and help keep this plant going and sharing it for free. And there are loads of other plants that you can save seeds from in September, lots of annual flowers and herbs, and you don't really have to worry about cross-pollination as much with them. With the lovage, I'm not worried at all. Welsh onions, I also save seeds from. coriander, cilantro, you can save seeds from. Loads and loads. And even if there are plants in your garden that do cross-pollinate, so say you've got 2 different types of lettuces, you can still save the seeds and see what happens in the end. It's all just kind of trial and error. And you might even be able to grow a new variety or a new type. You just never know with these things. This delightful pink flower growing on its own is a crinum, and it is completely new to me. A few years ago, I was given a bulb at a gardening event. It didn't have a label on it, so I just plugged it into the ground. It's been growing here ever since, but it's only ever produced this green foliage. And this year, it finally bloomed. And it's reminded me that I should definitely go to the garden center and have a mooch around for some autumn bulbs. And we can start planting them in September as well. And I have a couple of terracotta pots at home that are going to be perfect for growing bulbs in. And then I can set them out on the back patio and basically use them as a gauge to know when spring is almost here. And there's nothing more, I guess, optimistic looking out on a gray winter's day and starting to see those green shoots coming up and then eventually an explosion of color. And there are so many different types to choose from. We're back at the raspberries, but in my look around the allotment right now, there are a lot of things that I need to pick. And this is another big September garden job, is keeping on top of the harvest. There's just so much coming in right now. It's actually a little bit overwhelming at times. And what do you do with it all? And I know that a lot of people share their harvest with friends and family, but what you can also do is freeze a lot of things, and that's what I do. So these raspberries, I'll be taking them home, brushing them off, putting them on a baking tray that's lined in baking parchment, and just freeze them. And then we'll eat them next week and in the weeks to come. And you can also ferment. If you've got tomatoes, you can freeze them, or you can bottle them up. You can sun dry them, you can dehydrate them. There's just so many things that you can do. And so keeping on top of the harvest, ensuring that you're enjoying the garden's bounty through the winter and up until spring, along with those winter veg that you're going to be getting into your garden, is something to think about in September. It can be a whole lot of hard work, but you will definitely be pleased about it in a few months' time when the garden's looking a little bit bare. But when you open your freezer or you open your cupboards and you can see the last season's bounty right there waiting to be enjoyed, it will make all that effort seem like nothing. I've been really good at coming up and getting all of the courgettes this year. I think I'll leave the pumpkin though for a little bit longer, see if it gets a little bit bigger. But it looks pretty much done. That's going to be our Halloween pumpkin, our Hoptune pumpkin. September is a time for a lot of work, a lot of harvesting, but for me it's also one of my most favorite times of the year, this change in the air. You can feel the seasons change, at least here, and it's nice. I wish I had a bench in the middle of my allotment right now. This is a place where I work, but just taking the time sometimes to just have a moment and just enjoy it. This is really important. I would say this is one of the most important September garden jobs. And I think it's definitely something you should consider as well. Now there's other things that I'm thinking of right now that I need to get done. The pond is going to need to tidy out in September. The strawberry bed, I need to do something with it this month or sometime over the autumn and winter. There are the bird feeders to clean out because they'll start to be wanting to be fed pretty soon. And also lots of things going on at home. So starting to think about putting in the new beds there, and exciting times there. Now, I'm really interested to know what's on your September garden jobs list. So let me know as a comment down below. Let me know if you're doing any of the same things as me as well. And if any things are really different for your climate, make sure to put your climate, if you know what it is, down there as well. And also, if you are interested in a little bit further information and inspiration for things you can do in September, I have a video for how to create the Pallet compost bays. Dead simple. And also there's a video that I made some time ago about all of the different types of netting and protection that I use to keep my crops protected from birds and other wildlife. And that's something that I would say that you should definitely invest in if you're worried about your crops getting eaten over the winter. A bumblebee right there on the calendula. I just love this time of the year. Thank you so much for watching. And I will see you next time for another video here on Lovely Greens. Bye for now.